right, let's get ourselves organized here. We'll get started right around 10. And trying to get myself so I can see everyone. Miss Gilbert, you're here. Mr. Allman, Miss Alexander, Mr. Mercer. Let's see. All right, trying to get my screen organized here so I can see everyone. This hearing will be live streamed on YouTube. So if you are here just as an observer, I encourage you to join the YouTube stream and watch it there. The Zoom tends to have better fidelity when there are fewer people on there. But if this is the only way that you can watch, you're also welcome to be here. Just please keep yourself muted unless you need to speak.
And Your Honor, I'll note we have several people on who will be potential witnesses, and that's why we have more people than normally would be here with us as a party.
Okay, understood. All right, looks like we're having a little trouble getting this YouTube channel started. We won't go on the record until that's also up so that we can make sure that everyone who wants to watch is able to watch. Okay, while we're sorting that out, there are some people who are here on the phone. Are there any attorneys or anyone else who plans to participate by phone? I'd like to rename you so I can see who you are when you join us. You have to press *6 to unmute yourself. I have a bunch of people who are just on here as phone numbers who I can't tell. Okay, not hearing anything. Okay, and if we're unable to start the YouTube stream, then of course, anyone who wants to watch and participate can join this Zoom so that we can get started probably within about 5 minutes, hopefully. I've asked for our technical support, so hopefully we'll get that sorted. Okay, looks like we're still having problems with the YouTube stream. Unfortunately, that's something beyond my control. We're trying to fix that and we'll hopefully get started in a minute. Okay, so it looks like, excuse me, it looks like we'll just have to go ahead and start. Are there any parties here who need to contact someone who was planning to watch on YouTube and let them know they can join the Zoom? If you need to, we can take a minute to do that, but if not, we'll just go ahead and get started. And then if the YouTube issue is fixed, then we'll go back and let them do that as well. Okay. All right. Let me get us on the record. Actually, before we go on the record, who's here from the ED's office?
That's me, Your Honor. Brad Eckhart, and with me is Fernando Salazar Martinez.
Okay, great. Didn't see you earlier. Okay, so what I'm going to do when we get on the record, I'll call the case and then I'll take appearances from the people who I know are parties or are expected to be parties, and then we'll get into whether there are any other entities or individuals who are asking for reconsideration of any requests that were denied earlier or otherwise making requests to be admitted as parties.
Recording in progress.
All right, I am calling today a preliminary hearing in SOA docket 582-25-01778. It is TCEQ docket number 2024-0670-MWD. It is the application by Municipal Operations LLC for a new Texas Pollution Discharge Elimination System permit, number WQ00161-71001. Today is November 21st, 2024. It is about 10 minutes past 10 o'clock in the morning. My name is Pratibha Shenoy. I am one of the administrative law judges assigned to this case. With me is Judge Shelley Doggett. We will be presiding in this case, and it's being convened by Zoom video conference. So first, I'd like to take appearances from the parties who I'm aware of so far. So for the applicant, municipal operations.
Good morning, Your Honor. I'm Helen Gilbert on behalf of Municipal Operations LLC, the applicant in this matter. And a few people are joining me this morning. I'll start with my co-counsel.
Good morning. This is Carrie Qualtrough. I'm a co-counsel with Helen Gilbert.
Okay, thank
And
you.
with this, Your Honors, we have applicants' representatives, Norma Alejos, Richard Mott, and applicant's engineer, Troy Hotchkiss.
Okay, thank you. And for the executive director.
Good morning, Your Honor. I'm Bradford Eckhart, representing the executive director, and with me today is Fernando Salazar Martinez.
All right, thank you both. For the Office of Public Interest Counsel.
Good morning, Your Honor. This is Josiah Thomas Mercer with the Office of Public Interest Counsel.
Okay, thank you. For the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance.
Yes, good morning, Your Honor. Erik Allman here on behalf of the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance. I'm also here on behalf of the City of Gray Forest. We can either handle that now or get to that here in a minute.
We'll get to that in a minute. Okay, for the San Antonio Metropolitan Health District.
Good morning, Your Honor. Joe Freeland on behalf of City of San Antonio Metropolitan Health District.
Okay, thank you. And then Elizabeth Toper Wine, I believe I'm saying that correctly. I'm not sure. Are you present?
Your Honor, she's a member of the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance, and I do believe she is allowing the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance to participate in this matter as a representative capacity. So I don't think she will be seeking party status as an individual.
Okay, if you could make some filing official to that effect, that would be great since we have her listed separately.
Okay.
All right. So those are the parties that we are aware of thus far. First thing I want to do is take jurisdiction, though, over this case. So let me start with the applicant. Ms. Gilbert or Ms. Qualtrough, do you have the administrative record, including any jurisdictional documents you'd like to offer?
We do, Your Honor. We pre-filed both with Kiteworks, e-file, and on the TCEQ's website, one exhibit. It was a combined exhibit, tabs A through E. Tab A is the interim order. B are all the public notices except for the notice of this hearing. C are the executive director's documents, including the draft permit and the technical summary. D is the application, which is the subject of this proceeding, and E is the proof of notice of this proceeding, the preliminary hearing. So one exhibit, applicants, exhibit 1, we provided that to all the parties here except Ms. Tupperwine because we didn't have any electronic email for her. So it was sent, however, to GIA. So we will offer applicants exhibit 1, the administrative record at this time.
All right. Are there any objections to that exhibit and or to the State Office of Administrative Hearings taking jurisdiction in this case?
Your Honor, I'll simply note for the record that Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance objects to tab D which is the application being admitted for the truth of the matter asserted. We don't object to its admission to show what was said in the application, but we object to its admission for all purposes, just for the record.
I see. Ms. Gilbert, do you have a response for the record?
Your Honor, it's a business record. It's an exception to hearsay. We will obviously offer it again through parts of the application, rather through the engineer sponsoring it when we get to the hearing on the merits, but it's a business record.
And as far as this preliminary hearing is concerned, the objection is noted for the record. It's overruled. This is for purposes of jurisdiction. So tabs A through E, that's exhibit 1 for applicant, are admitted, and I am finding that so it does have jurisdiction over this case, including holding the hearing on the merits and preparing a proposal for decision. Now, the next thing I'd like to do, which I expect we'll be spending some time on, is addressing party status. The applicant, the executive director, and OPIC are statutory parties. The commission determined when it issued the interim order that, do you say GIA, Mr. Allman?
Yeah, GIA.
GIA, okay, which is the Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance,
Yes.
is a party of the San Antonio Metropolitan Health District. And Ms. Toperwine, who I understand from Mr. Allman is going to be represented as a member of GIA. So those are the parties who were addressed as of the time of the interim order. Are there any objections to those parties? All right.
No, Your
Hearing none, let me start. I'm sorry, Ms. Gilbert, were you about to say something?
No objection.
Okay, thank you. Let me start now with other people who are seeking party status. Are there parties who are represented by counsel who are seeking party status? I'd like to start with them.
Yes, Your Honor. This is Erik Allman. I'm also representing the City of Great Forest, who is seeking party status today to this hearing.
All right, and let me know first who I should put on my screen so that I can see who you might be calling. Or
yeah, I'll note that the mayor of the City of Great Forest, Paul Gerro, is here. We do anticipate calling him as a witness. We also have Michael Phillips, who is a city council person. We don't anticipate calling him as a witness. We have Erik Remmert here, who is head of the utilities, the Great City of Great Forest Utilities. I anticipate we will call him as a witness. And all this is presuming, if party status is opposed. We have Lauren Ross here as an expert who we would anticipate calling if necessary. That would be all the persons we would anticipate calling as a witness. Also here with me is an associate co-counsel on the matter, Lauren Alexander, my legal assistant, Claire Hammerlink. And I'll note that Annalisa Peace with GIA is on the Zoom, as well as Nathan Glavey is on the Zoom with Greater Edwards Aquifer Alliance. And I think that is who we have present for the City of Great Forest and for GIA.
all right, so for the City of Great Forest, I know that the commission did deny that request after considering all the information that was presented at that time. So, Mr. Allman, are you presenting any new information or new argument in this request for reconsideration?
Yeah, we're presenting new information, and we would note that the statutes require that a person seek party status at the preliminary hearing in order to seek judicial review of the commission's decision. So certainly we believe we should be granted. I think there's further information regarding particularly groundwater impacts, and we have an expert here to provide information that wasn't before the commission. But we also make sure that we are presenting a good record upon which you can make a decision.
Ms. Gilbert, I assume that you would renew applicant's objection?
We object, Your Honor.
All right, and I know from the documents that were filed before the interim order that OPIC and the ED had also taken positions on party status. So we'll hear from all of them after I let Mr. Allman put on his case.
May we proceed, Your Honor?
Yes, who are you calling first?
We would, and just to give you an outline, as I said, I anticipate calling first Mr. Paul Gerro, the mayor, to demonstrate authority and describe a park located in the area. Then we would call Erik Remmert with the utilities to help explain where groundwater wells are there located by the City of Great Forest. And finally, Lauren Ross is an expert to explain, in her expert opinion, how both the groundwater wells and the use of the park will be impacted, just to outline where we're going with this. So first, I would call Paul Gerro as a witness.
Okay. Sir, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
I do.
Could you spell your first and last name for me, please?
Paulgarro.
Okay, very good. Go ahead, Mr. Allman.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Gerro. First, could you please state your name for the record?
Good morning, Paul Gerro.
Okay. And do you hold a position with the City of Gray Forest?
Yes, I'm the mayor and, in fact, chief executive officer of the City of Gray Forest.
Okay. I would like to look now at an exhibit. Claire, if you could pull up that, what would be marked as Exhibit 1. Do you have before you a resolution adopted by the city?
Correct, I see that.
Okay. And I guess, is it large enough on your screen for you to be able to read?
Yes,
Okay. What resolution number is this?
this is resolution number 2021-17R.
And does this regard what is described as the Guajolote ranch tract?
Correct.
And is it your understanding that's the tract of land to be served by the wastewater treatment plant at issue in the current proceeding?
Yes.
And now I'd like to look at the third whereas in this resolution.
Okay.
Does that describe certain infrastructure
Yes.
for the project? And does that include an on-site wastewater treatment plant?
Yes.
And I'd like to look at, so this resolution in part was addressing that on-site wastewater treatment plant to serve the development.
Correct.
And now I'd like to look at the top of the second PDF page here. Does the top whereas note, well, could you read that paragraph there to the top whereas?
Yes. Whereas the City of Gray Forest owns and maintains the property that was the Scenic Loop Playground, which consists of approximately 28 acres of green spaces, trails, Lee Creek, which is a natural spring-fed creek, and the Helotes Creek riparian area.
Okay. And is that statement true?
Yes.
Now, could you look with me to the next whereas?
Yes.
And could you read that one aloud, please?
Whereas the city has invested thousands of dollars removing exotic invasive vegetation, and citizens have donated thousands of hours restoring Helotes Creek and Lee Creek to keep the properties intact as a wildlife sanctuary.
Is that true?
Yes.
Now I'd look at PDF page 3 of this document. In section 1. Could you please read that, section
Yes.
1?
That the City of Gray Forest, Texas confirms by this resolution its opposition to the development of the Guajolote Ranch Tract Project, including opposition to the infrastructure sewer options for multiple new lift stations, oversized gravity sewer main, and on-site wastewater treatment plant. Opposition to the extension and development of the sewer CCN at the proposed location of and to the project and any location along creeks due to the negative environmental impacts, disruption to the natural creek systems, and direct and indirect impact, and its opposition to the San Antonio Water System Board approval thereof.
Okay, Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 1 into the record.
Any objections to Exhibit 1?
No, Your Honor.
Okay, and hearing none, I'll admit that exhibit. Can you tell me that number again so that I can just make a record of it? Resolution number 2021-17R. Okay, thank you. That's admitted.
And now I would like to pull up what would be marked as Exhibit 2 to this proceeding. And perhaps we could blow that up a little bit. Do you see before you now what's been marked as Exhibit 2, Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
And what is this exhibit?
So this particular exhibit is in opposition. So it's similar in describing assets of the city of Gray Forest in its historical and natural and environmental assets. And then it is particularly in opposition to the permit in regards to the development on the Guajolote Ranch.
So is this resolution number 2022-28R?
Yes,
And does that make reference to TCEQ proposed permit number WQ0016171001?
yes.
Now, I'd like to look at the third whereas clause. Could you read that, please, for me?
Yes. Whereas the city of Gray Forest is located in the Edwards Aquifer Contributing Zone, contains karst zones 1, 2, and 3, and portions of Critical Habitat Unit 5 and Critical Habitat Unit 6, which contains 9 endangered species.
And could you read the next whereas clause, please?
Whereas the city of San Antonio has acknowledged the environmental sensitivity of this area because of its multiple caves and sinkholes feeding directly into the Edwards Aquifer.
And I think you skipped over one. Do you see the one that says, whereas the city of Gray Forest maintains approximately 28 acres?
I'm
of
sorry.
green
Yes.
Oh, could you read that one, please?
Whereas the city of Gray Forest maintains approximately 28 acres of green spaces, trails, Lee Creek, which is a natural spring-fed creek, and the Helotes Creek riparian area.
And again, was that the park area that we referenced previously on the prior resolution?
Correct.
Now, if we could turn to the second page of this document and look to the second whereas there, could you please read that one?
Whereas the discharge of treated wastewater in the proposed location would result in permanent impacts to the creeks, springs, trees, historic and archaeological sites, trails, and wildlife, including endangered species, forever changing the city of Gray Forest's way of life.
Now I'd like to look down at the resolved section of this resolution. Does that confirm by the resolution opposition to TCEQ proposed permit number WQ0016171001?
Yes.
Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 2 into the record.
Any objections?
I would like to know if the mayor was in his current position, both when the adoption of 2021 17R and 2022 28R were both adopted by the city council. When was the mayor elected to office?
I see. Mayor, can you answer that?
Yes. The second resolution was under Mayor Waldrop, and I took the role as mayor this July 2024.
We'll object on the basis of hearsay, actually, to both. I know that I waived that objection earlier, but I'll renew it. It's hearsay.
I see. Mr. Allman.
Yeah, this is a public record, Your Honor.
And
proper,
go ahead, Ms.
a proper witness to sponsor this resolution. These were both passed before his tenure with the city.
Your Honor, does I understand that to be an authentication objection or hearsay?
I believe Ms. Gilbert said hearsay, but
okay. Yeah, as to hearsay, this is a public record. We would respond.
And I think I've heard enough. I'll overrule the objection. I'll admit it's resolution 2022-28R as Exhibit 2.
And now if I could pull up Exhibit 3. Mr. Mayor, do you have before you now Exhibit 3?
Yes, I do.
And do you recognize that document?
Yes.
What is that document?
So these are the policies, procedures, and rules of order for the city of Gray Forest.
Okay, and now if we could look to PDF page 5 of this document. And if I could look at within section 2.1. does that provide within that paragraph that the mayor is the city's chief executive officer?
Correct.
And is that the case?
Yes.
Okay. Now, as the city's chief executive officer, are you here seeking party status on behalf of this city of Gray Forest?
Yes.
Okay. Now, Your Honor, we would offer Exhibit 3.
No objection.
And hearing no objection, I will admit Exhibit 3.
Okay. We would now pull up Exhibit 4. Mr. Mayor, do you have before you now Exhibit 4?
Yes,
Have you previously reviewed this?
I have.
To your understanding, what is this?
So this map tries to capture the proximity of the city of Gray Forest and its ETJ to the Guajolote Ranch, the proposed wastewater treatment plant, and the discharge location.
Okay, if we could enlarge, is it your understanding that the area in yellow is the area within the city limits of the city of Gray Forest?
Correct. The area in yellow is the limits of the city of Gray Forest.
And is the ETJ of the city of Gray Forest indicated on this figure in any way?
Yes, I don't know if it's red or purple. So as you see the dotted yellow line, this signifies a certain area around the Guajolote Ranch, and then there's a purple line that shows the ETJ of the city of Gray Forest.
And if we look within this area of yellow, is the 28 acres located within that area?
Yes, so Helotes Creek meanders directly through the city of Gray Forest, and the 28 acres are on both sides of that creek going through the entire city of Gray Forest.
And how is that area used?
So the area is used to maintain its natural environment. It's used for hiking, swimming, fishing, recreation, and educational programs.
Is there an area called Madla Park within the city limits?
So the area called Madla Park is, if you look at the names on there, there's a name called Timothy Patrick Ho and a yellow dot. Just to the left of that yellow dot is Madla Park.
What's the proximity of Madla Park to Helotes Creek?
So it is just near Helotes Creek.
And does Helotes Creek relate to the enjoyment of Madla Park in any way?
Yes.
And how is that?
So Madla Park is a conservation easement that helps protect the environment, and especially the Edwards Aquifer. And so as people enjoy Helotes Creek and all the amenities around Helotes Creek, they also have a park where they can recreate, hike, birdwatch, etc.
And does the city of Gray Forest have any responsibilities in relation to either the 28-acre park or Madla Park?
Yes, so the city owns and maintains the 28-acre park, and then also owns and helps maintain the Madla Park.
Does the 28-acre park we've been discussing have a name?
We refer to it as Scenic Loop Playground.
Okay.
That was its original state prior to the city taking over control and owning that area.
Your Honor, with that, we pass this witness for cross-examination. Yeah,
All
first
right.
we offer this exhibit that we've been looking at. The ED map is Exhibit 4.
All right.
And
So-
we would object to the map.
You would object to the map?
We do, Your Honor. This witness didn't prepare the map. This, as he just said, is the executive director's map that was attached to their response to hearing requests. It's not composed or created in the normal course of business. It's only attached to the hearing request. This isn't the proper witness, and this isn't the proper predicate to offer this exhibit. This is the executive director's exhibit.
Mr.
Your Honor,
Allen?
again, this is a government document prepared specifically by the executive director in this matter. In fact, it may be within the administrative record that was previously admitted. And it is offered, to the degree it's not admitted for all purposes, it's offered for demonstrative purposes to address the parks that were addressed in the resolutions previously admitted.
All right. I am not aware that it's in the administrative record, Ms. Gilbert.
It is not. Neither the response to comments nor the response to hearing requests is in the record, nor is there anybody on the Zoom call today representing the ED that even created this map. This is
Okay. So
if we could quickly, just so the record is clear, if we could look at the top of this map, and just to be clear, this is Municipal Operations LLC map 2 with the seal of the TCEQ on it, just so the record is clear of what we're talking about.
okay, I understand, and it's not actually, as far as I can tell, part of the administrative record that
Okay.
I've seen, but I will allow you to have it as a demonstrative exhibit, Mr. Allman. We've already gotten the testimony that you wanted from the mayor on that.
Okay. Yeah.
So that's exhibit 4. Is
yes,
that right?
Your Honor. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a demonstrative.
Yes, Your Honor. We would pass the witness with that.
Okay, now for examination by other parties, I'd like to start, in general, we do this, and actually, Mr. Allman, if you could take the map down. Thank you. I'd like to start with parties who are less adverse. So in other words, parties who would support Gray Forest's application to be a party in this case, and then let the applicant go later. So are there individuals, let me start with that, any individuals or other represented parties other than the ED and OPIC who have any questions for this witness?
No questions, Your Honor.
Okay. All right. Mr. Eckhart, let me ask you, do you have any questions?
No questions, Your Honor.
All right, and could you, just for the record, explain to me the position that the ED took prior to the interim order being issued?
In our response to hearing requests, the ED did recommend that the City of Gray Forest be considered an affected person, but at the agenda meeting, the commission did not find that the City of Gray Forest was an affected person, but we defer to you, the ALJ, on whether the city should be admitted as a party to this proceeding.
Understood, thank you. Mr. Mercer, for OPIC, did you have any questions?
No, I don't have any questions, Your Honor.
And similarly, OPIC in its response to comments did recommend a party status or affected person status?
We did not recommend party status. I will note there were a lot of Gray Forest citizens that submitted hearing requests, and there is new information that came out in this hearing, so we'll defer to you, Your Honor.
Okay, and you have no questions?
No.
All right. In that case, Ms. Gilbert, I think you would be up.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm also going to ask that our engineer put a map up on the screen that we prepared, and it's only being shown at least the moment for demonstrative purposes. I have limited questions for the mayor. And may I address him directly? I can't see him, so I just wanted to make sure he's on the screen.
Yes, and I can see him. His label says City of Gray Forest, so you might need to pull him up on your Zoom screen, but he's there.
Okay, and I'm going to ask applicant's engineer to put up our map on the screen if he has access. Okay, or yeah, we're sharing. Okay. Mr. Mayor, are you able to see the map that was just put up on the screen by applicant?
Yes.
Okay. Earlier, you testified in response to Mr. Allman's questions about a playground. Were you identifying more than one playground or just one playground called the Madla Playground or Madla Park, excuse me?
No, there's two particular areas. One that we call the Scenic Loop Playground Club is 28 acres that follows along the Helotes Creek. And then Madla Park, which is at the bottom end of Gray Forest, is 42 acres. That's a defined park different from the Scenic Loop Playground Club.
Okay, so for the Madla Park, that was in the lower right-hand corner of the purple area, correct?
Correct.
It was meant to represent the city's corporate limits. And can you, in a narrative way, I know you don't have access to this map, tell us where the Scenic Loop Park would be?
Right. So if you were to follow Helotes Creek, which I believe enters in the upper left. Yeah, there you go. So as Helotes Creek enters in the upper left area of Gray Forest, it meanders through and impacts right through the city of Gray Forest. In fact, it crosses over Scenic Loop Road and then goes right past City Hall and then goes towards the lower part of city of Gray Forest and then proceeds forward from there.
Sir, I'm sorry, my question is relative to the Scenic Loop Park, not
Right.
the of Helotes Creek. So can you tell us approximately where the Scenic Loop Park is located?
So it's actually on both sides of the creek. So that the designated area is on both sides of the creek, all along the Helotes Creek area.
Is it within the city limits?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. I think earlier you also were reading from one of the resolutions, I think it was the first one, that the city has concerns with the oversizing of the treatment plant, allegedly lift stations in the CCN. Is that correct?
Correct.
Thank you. Your Honor, I don't have any more questions for this witness at this time.
Mr. Allman, do you have any redirect?
No, we have no redirect for this witness.
And do you have other witnesses that you plan to call also from Gray Forest?
Yes, Your Honor.
All right, let's proceed with your next witness then.
Okay, we would call Mr. Erik Remmert to the stand.
I'm trying to find him
I think
on my
he's
screen.
in the same room as the mayor was in. They're just going to swap out.
Oh, got it. Okay. See you there. And sir, if you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
And can you spell your first and last name for me, please?
Erik, E-R-I-K. Last name Remmert, R-E-M-M-E-R-T.
Great, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Allman.
Yes, good morning, Mr. Remmert. Do you hold any, well, first let me ask you, is there a utility related to the city of Gray Forest?
There is Gray Forest Utilities, and the utility provides gas and water service to the city of Gray Forest.
And so when you say water service, how is that water provided by the city of Gray Forest used?
The city of Gray Forest receives the potable water for the city from a system of 2 wells that the utility has in the city limits.
And I guess that water, once it's provided, is that used for drinking water and other types of municipal uses?
Yes, it's potable water.
Okay. Now, and I think you mentioned groundwater wells. Can you first generally describe where those groundwater wells are located?
They're in the city limits, up on a hill. And there is 2 wells, and then there's a water tank as well, and the associated equipment to distribute the water throughout the system.
Okay, I'd like to pull up what will be marked as Exhibit 5. Do you have this exhibit before you now?
I do.
And if we could so look closely at the area in blue, or highlight it in blue. Well, have you reviewed this exhibit before?
I have.
And what does this exhibit show?
It shows the location of the 2 wells in proximity, where they're located in the city and in proximity to the subject property, Guajolote Ranch.
All right. And how are those wells labeled on this figure?
They're labeled wells 1 and 2.
Okay. Your Honor, we would offer this as Exhibit 5.
Same objection, Your Honor. We have no idea who prepared this representation, where the underlying data, well location came from. Was it based on a Texas Water Development Board, well log, etc.?
Your Honor, perhaps
Mr. Allman, do you want to lay some foundation for that?
Yeah, let me go ahead and ask a few more questions. Are you familiar with how this map was prepared, Mr. Remmert?
Yes.
And how was this prepared?
This map part of the report from Wet Rock Resources?
And what is that report?
That report was a consultant's report that the utility had performed earlier this year to understand the water resources and to better understand the production capacity of the existing wells and the water system to supply the citizens of Gray Forest.
And do you recognize the area shown in this photograph?
Yes, I do.
Is that a fair and accurate depiction of that area from an aerial perspective?
It is.
And is this a fair and accurate representation of the location of the Gray Forest Water Service wells?
It is.
Okay. Your Honor, we would renew our offer of this exhibit.
And Your Honor, I'll renew my objection and add that it is hearsay. It is an out-of-court statement. It was prepared by Wet Rock, and it also sounds like it was prepared for the purposes of assessing quantity, water supply, and doesn't relate to water quality. And so it's also irrelevant.
So, Mr. Allman, are you seeking to illustrate primarily through this map the location of the wells relative to the ranch?
Yeah, we're seeking primarily just to demonstrate the location of the wells. I would note
Right,
the photograph.
That, I believe, was sufficiently within Mr. Remmert's knowledge, and he did confirm that that is what is depicted here. So I'll treat it as a demonstrative. So that's Exhibit 5.
Okay, yeah. And if we could look back real quickly to Exhibit 4, which was previously admitted, Mr. Remmert. And if we could blow up the area just to the north of the city limits there. Mr. Remmert, can you generally describe the location of the wells in relationship to the labeling on this map?
I cannot see the bottom, or I cannot see the whole yellow area.
Well, let's look up towards the top. Do you see the name Daniel Rosen?
I do.
Are the wells generally in the location of that name?
Yes.
Okay. Now I'd like to look at Exhibit 6. Do you recognize what's before you now as Exhibit 6?
I do.
What is this?
This is the cover page for the Wet Rock report that was completed earlier this year.
Okay. And now I'd like to look at PDF page 13 of this report. If we could, do you recognize what's before you now?
I do.
And does this show the geological formations present beneath the groundwater wells?
It does.
Okay. And now what formation is present at the surface?
Well,
Zoom in a little bit.
if you could blow it up just a little bit, please. And I'm sorry, your question again is?
Okay, let's look closely at where we have. Do you see the well numbers 1 and 2 labeled here with the blue circle?
I do.
And does that have a green cross hatching at that location?
It does.
And if we look down at the column, if we look at the Glen Rose limestone area, do you see there?
I do.
And you see KGR labeled there?
I do.
Is that the same as the color indicated where the wells are located to be at the surface?
It is.
And so is this indicating, if we could look back down there, that the wells at the surface are in the Glen Rose limestone?
That is correct. It's part of the Trinity Aquifer. Yes.
Yes. Now, if we could look at page 22 of this report, PDF page 22. Do you recognize what's before you now?
I do.
And what's before you now?
This is a cross section showing the two wells, well number 1 and well number 2.
And is there a label of which formation these are completed into for each of these?
There is.
And what does that indicate to be the formation?
It's the Trinity and it's the lower Glen Rose.
Okay. Now, if we could look at page 34 of this document. And I'd like to look at the third bullet here. Does that state the primary source of recharge to Trinity Aquifer is precipitation on the unconfined portion of the aquifer, as well as stream and lake losses to the aquifer?
It does.
And does that provide that the karst nature and open fractures of the rock units that compose the Trinity Aquifer allow for very rapid recharge to the aquifer?
That is correct.
Your Honor, we would offer this as Exhibit 6.
Your
Ms.
Honor,
Gilbert?
we would also object to this. This is an out-of-court statement made to prove the truth of the matter asserted. We're now into where the public drinking water supply wells are completed in the subsurface. This is still a document prepared by somebody who isn't here today, Wet Rock, who are professional geologists who, by the way, work for Applicant. And this witness has not shown himself, I can ask questions to this effect, but has not shown himself to be a competent witness in geology, geoscience, geophysics, any matters dealing with the subsurface.
Mr. Allman?
Your Honor, this is a government document. This was prepared for the city in order to further the city's responsibility for the maintaining of the water system.
Your Honor, this is a 13-page document that was provided us by email this morning at 9:31 or 9:32. We haven't reviewed all of it. All we've seen is the cover page that clearly establishes that it was created by someone that's not here today, Wet Rock, who is a consultant. It's not clear that this was prepared for the city of Gray Forest or even Mr. Remmert in his role as the utility provider.
Okay,
I can
so
go ahead and clear that up if necessary.
all right, if you'd like to ask more questions and reoffer it, I'll let you do that.
Okay. For what purpose, are you familiar with the purpose for which this document was prepared, Mr. Remmert?
Yes, I am.
And for what purpose was this prepared?
It was prepared for the purpose of understanding the water system that provides the potable water to the city of Gray Forest, to understand the water, the formations and the aquifers from where the water came from, to understand the production capacities and the actual capabilities of the potable water supply.
And who was the document prepared for?
the document was prepared for the utility, Gray Forest Utilities.
Okay, and with that, Your Honor, we would renew our offer of the exhibit.
Your
Ms.
Honor,
Gilbert.
the witness just testified that this was prepared to assess production capacity. That is not a subject that was referred by the TCEQ in this matter. Again, quantity, not quality. This is a relevant document.
And Mr. Allman, the testimony from the witness is in the record. He's already read some portions of it into the record. I'll take that for what it is, but I'm not going to admit this exhibit.
Okay, Your Honor, we would supply this as an offer of proof.
You can certainly do that.
And with that, that's our questions for this witness. We pass the witness for cross-examination.
Okay. Let me first ask, are there any parties who support Gray Forest being a affected person, found an affected person in this case, who would like to ask any questions? No. All right. Mr. Eckert?
No questions from the ED, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Mercer?
I have no questions as well, Your Honor. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone else before I go to the applicant? Not hearing anything. Ms. Gilbert?
Thank you, Your Honor. Mr. Remmert, I'm sorry, I missed your title. What is your title with the city, please?
I'm General Manager and CEO for Gray Forest Utilities.
Is that the same thing as like the utility director? You direct the entire utility department?
That is correct.
Okay. And in your duties, do you review and approve wastewater discharge permits?
I do not.
Okay. Do you have any responsibilities relative to reviewing requests for water quality permits of any kind?
I do not.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all.
I'm sorry. I should say that we are bound as a water utility provider. We have to abide by TCEQ rules for water quality. And so we do perform the required TCU tests on the well system to ensure that the quality of the water, it meets TCEQ requirements.
Understood. Just like any retail public utility would under the TCEQ rules, correct? For public water.
Correct. We are bound by the regulatory requirements, and we provide all those, perform those tests and provide them to TCEQ.
Thank you, Your Honor. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Allman?
We have no redirect for this witness.
Okay. Do you have other witnesses?
Yes, we have one more witness, Dr. Lauren Ross, that we'll be calling.
Okay. Who will be in the same room, I take it?
I think she's participating
there.
separately.
Okay. I see Dr. Ross there. Great. And you'll just have to unmute yourself.
Thank you.
Okay. If you could raise your right hand. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give in this proceeding will be the truth, the whole truth, nothing but the truth?
Yes, I do.
All right. And I have your name there, Lauren, Lauren, Ross, Ross.
Yes.
Okay, great. I can see it there. So that's perfect. Go ahead, Mr. Allman.
Yeah, could you please state your name for the record?
Yes, my name is Dr. Lauren Ross.
And do you have a position with any company or business?
I am the owner of Glen Rose Engineering, Inc.
And what does Glen Rose Engineering do?
We are an environmental and engineering consulting firm.
Have you testified in any TCEQ wastewater permit proceedings before?
Yes, I have.
And could you please describe the nature of that testimony and which matters to your recollection? So representative, which matters you participated in?
I have participated in contested case hearings for Texas land application permits and discharge permits. Many of those have been associated with the Edwards and with the Trinity aquifers. I have also testified in similar cases along the coast of Texas. I think the number of Texas pollution discharge elimination system permits that I've testified to is on the order of about 20.
And in testifying in those matters, what was your role?
My role was to review the permit applications, the effluent limitations, the underlying TCEQ basis for the draft permits, to look at information regarding surface water quality, surface water flows, climate, the proposed discharge quality, and to offer opinions as to whether or not the permits met the TCEQ regulations regarding compliance with the Clean Water Act.
And were you admitted as an expert in those matters?
Yes.
And do you have any licenses or certifications?
I am a licensed professional engineer in the state of Texas since 1984.
And do you have any undergraduate degrees?
I have a Bachelor of Science, a Master's of Science, and a Doctorate of Philosophy degrees. All of those degrees are in civil engineering with an emphasis on environmental health and water resources.
Have you reviewed the application at issue in this proceeding?
Yes.
And have you reviewed some of the information related to the location of the parks owned by the City of Gray Forest and the groundwater wells owned by the Gray Forest Utility?
I have looked at information regarding the proposed discharge from Guajolote, the boundaries, city limits of Gray Forest, the location of their 2 groundwater wells, and generally the path of Elotes Creek through their city.
In your opinion, would the wastewater discharge authorized by the draft permit potentially impact Elotes Creek within the boundaries of the City of Gray Forest?
Yes.
And can you please describe why that is?
I think there are 2 reasons why this discharge permit could potentially impact Elotes Creek and the associated groundwater and the Trinity Aquifer from which the City of Gray Forest gets its drinking water supply. The first is that the proposed permit limits have an effluent limitation for ammonia nitrogen, but there is no limitation on total nitrogen. In the effluent data that I have looked at, without a limitation on total nitrogen, there can be concentrations of somewhere between 25 and maybe even as much as 50 or 60 milligrams per liter of nitrogen, usually in the form of nitrate nitrogen, in an effluent discharge. That is a very common occurrence, and those are concentration ranges that might be discharged and would be legal to discharge under the proposed draft permit. The drinking water supply limit for nitrate nitrogen is 10 milligrams per liter as nitrogen. And so there is a potential for excessive concentrations of nitrate nitrogen in Elotes Creek. Elotes Creek, as it crosses the City of Gray Forest, has been demonstrated to be a recharging creek into the Trinity Aquifer and from the Trinity Aquifer into the Edwards Aquifer. And so that represents a risk to the drinking water supplies of both City of Gray Forest and other wells completed into that aquifer downstream or down gradient from the proposed discharge. There is also the potential for excessive nutrients in Elotes Creek itself. Those nutrients can result in algae blooms downstream those algae blooms can spiral. I have seen that spiraling occur downstream from discharges for several miles below a wastewater effluent discharge. And I guess I will add that Elotes Creek appears to be a relatively small creek. I think the TCEQ identified it as intermittent with pools, which means that there will be very little dilution of the wastewater effluent occurring in the creek under normal or drought conditions.
You said that you've seen algae impacts occur, several miles downstream. Would you anticipate the potential for nutrients to cause algae impacts within the distance that Helotes Creek travels through the city of Gray Forest?
I think that is definitely a possibility, yes.
And what types of impacts would one see if that were to occur?
The classic algae bloom is you take a clear Texas Hill Country stream with a clean limestone bottom, and then when there's an algae impact, you add on top of that Cladophora algae, which are diagnostic of effluent discharge. They tend to be these long strands. They can be as long as 10, even 15 feet long. Makes it pretty much impossible to wade or swim in a creek with a Cladophora bloom. You can also see other kinds of spirulina algae. They can decay. It can be odorous. It's just not the classic clean, clear Texas Hill Country water that we are used to in a stream that has not been impacted by a wastewater discharge.
And can those impacts at that distance impact the type of wildlife or aquatic life one would expect to find in the stream?
Yes, you can have shifts in the kinds of fish that are there. You can have certain kinds of snails or mussels that in some cases, some of the more sensitive species will decrease in numbers, and the less sensitive species will increase.
And why is it that those types of nutrient impacts would cause those changes in the aquatic life present?
I'm not sure I know the answer to that. I know I don't even know that biologists know the answer to that. Let me just think.
Perhaps if I ask a few questions, it might.
Okay.
So what is dissolved oxygen?
Dissolved oxygen is the amount of oxygen that is present in the water, dissolved.
And do fish and other aquatic life depend upon dissolved oxygen?
Yes, they do.
And how do they depend upon dissolved oxygen?
If the aquatic life lives completely inside the water, and it depends on oxygen for its metabolic processes, then the water is the single source of oxygen for those metabolic processes.
And can the algae growth you previously described impact dissolved oxygen levels within water?
Yes. Typically, what you see with algae growth is you see what we call the diurnal swing. Algae photosynthesize when there is sunlight. That photosynthesis process puts additional oxygen into the water. And then at night, there's no photosynthesis, but the algae is continuing to respire. Their metabolic processes continue, and there's a classic kind of increase in dissolved oxygen in the daytime and decrease in the night.
And can that impact upon dissolved oxygen caused by the algae impact the assemblage of aquatic life present?
It can, yes, it can. It will. If there are species that are more sensitive to the dissolved oxygen concentrations, those species will tend to decrease. The ones that are less sensitive will tend to increase.
And so is that one of the ways that algae growth as a result of a wastewater discharge can cause some change in the wildlife assemblage one sees?
Yes, that is true.
And do you have experience with fate and transport in groundwater?
I do.
And what is that experience?
My master's research was the fate of and transport of both water and solutes through the Vados zone. I have done since the 1980s groundwater modeling to look at fate and transport of nutrients, of petrochemicals, of other kinds of solvents and metals in groundwater.
And you noted the wells, and I think you expressed an opinion that the wells owned by the City of Gray Forest Utility could be impacted by this. Were you here for the prior testimony and discussion of those wells?
I was.
And what formation is it your understanding those wells are completed into?
They are in the Trinity Aquifer. The Texas Water Development Board database indicates that they are completed in Cow Creek and Hinsville Sand formations.
And is there anything about those formations that relates to your particular concern as to the potential for them to be, those wells be impacted?
Yes, both of those formations readily transmit groundwater. There is a research study by the Southwest Research Institute that looks particularly at the transmissivity of groundwater associated with Elotes Creek and this general area of Central Texas. And that study documented the migration of water from the land surface in this area into the lower Trinity and also into the Edwards Aquifer.
And so that would be from the surface into the types of areas where these wells are completed.
It would be.
Okay. Are there contaminants other than, well, are there contaminants other than nitrogen that would be contained in this discharge?
I would expect there to be elevated concentrations of nitrogen. I would expect there to be elevated concentrations of total phosphorus, even though the limit on the permit is 0.15 milligrams per liter. That is higher than background levels. There's the potential for a whole range of other kinds of contaminants that we generally classify as into the category of emerging contaminants, and it can include things like the hormones in birth control pills or the medications in blood thinners, acetaminophen. All of these chemicals have been detected in groundwater associated with karst aquifers where there has been wastewater discharge contamination.
And in your opinion, is there a potential for this discharge to discharge those types of emerging contaminants, or for those contaminants to reach the groundwater wells operated by the City of Gray Forest Utility?
Your Honor, at this point, I'm going to insert an objection as to relevancy. As you know, in a prior docket that you were involved in, which was 582-2323-818, that was the Highland Lakes Midlothian LLC matter. The TCEQ specifically changed findings of fact and conclusions of law to state that no federal or state law regulates CECs, which is what we're talking about here, contaminants of emerging concern or forever chemicals. And so this is not there and not now an issue referred for this proceeding. So it's really irrelevant to any consideration of the city's standing, much less the substantive basis upon which you're going to assess the application once we get to that point.
Mr.
Your Honor,
Allman?
yeah, later, should this go forward to a hearing on the merits, we could get into whether limits are appropriate or what types of limits would be appropriate to address those types of contaminants. The commission has decided not to include limits and not to try and regulate these through the permit, but that doesn't mean they do not have an impact upon water quality. And the first issue referred is one of whether this draft permit is protective of surface water quality or groundwater quality. And so this does go towards one of the potential ways in which the discharge could impact the wells operated by the City of Great Forest utility.
Your Honor, may I read from the final order in that case?
Ms. Gilbert, I don't think there's a need for that at this point. Mr. Allman, I think to the extent that you're trying to shed light on the city's interests in this case and what they are, you've already gotten that testimony from Dr. Ross. So if you can just move on,
Okay.
I think we're good on that point.
And with that, that's all of my questions for the witness. I would pass the witness for cross-examination.
All right. Is there anyone who has questions for Dr. Ross who would support Gray Forest being recognized as a party? Not hearing anything. Mr. Eckert?
No questions, Your Honor.
Mr. Mercer?
No questions, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. And is there any other party? All right. Not hearing anything. Ms. Gilbert, if you have questions for Dr. Ross, you may proceed.
I do. I just have a few. Hi, Dr. Ross. It's been many, many years since I've seen you. It's nice to see you again. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you fine. Nice to see you.
Okay. I know you've testified in a lot of matters, but your credentials are as a registered professional engineer, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to clarify that you're not a professional geologist or geoscientist, correct?
Under the definition of geoscientist, that geoscientist encompasses both the disciplines of geology and civil engineering, where the civil engineering practice has a relationship to groundwater. So under TCEQ would recognize me as a geoscientist, yes.
Okay, but that only goes to something like 5 feet underground, correct? Not the entire.
No, it would include any opinions related to groundwater.
Have you personally taken any stream measurements of Helotes Creek within the corporate limits of Gray Forest?
No.
Have you assessed the tree canopy of any of the trees along the Helotes Creek in the city limits of Gray Forest?
I have looked at aerial photography of the tree canopy of Helotes Creek. What I'm remembering in this moment, I was upstream of Gray Forest. I'm not sure I went all the way down through the city limits itself.
Well, earlier you said, I think, that the 0.15 proposed total phosphorus limit was higher than the background. And so is that background, which you purport is lower than the limit, based on your personal study or something that you gleaned from the Southwest Research Report or something else?
Yeah, so I hope my testimony was clear, and if it's not, let me make it clear right now. My opinion that 0.15 milligrams per liter of total phosphorus is higher than background concentrations is based on numerous stream studies in the Texas Hill Country surrounding Helotes Creek. I have not personally, or if I've seen it, I don't remember in this moment. I have not seen or evaluated the water quality data for Helotes Creek at that concentration.
Do you know if the site is within the contributing zone or the recharge zone of the Edwards Aquifer?
When you say the site, do you mean the
Guajolote site, which would include the facility itself, the wastewater treatment plant, and the property on Guajolote Ranch? Do you know if that's over the contributing or recharge zone?
Yes, I do know.
Which one?
It's in the contributing zone.
I'll pass the witness. Thank you, Dr. Ross.
All right, Mr. Allman, do you have any redirect or further questions?
Yes, brief redirect. Dr. Ross, you were asked questions regarding whether you're a geologist or geoscientist. Do you have prior experience in evaluating hydrology in the subsurface?
Yes.
And could you please describe that?
Goodness gracious.
Well, let me back up and maybe we'll take it in pieces. Do you have
Okay.
do you have any education specifically related to subsurface evaluation?
Yes, I do.
Could you please
prior to my master's degree, during my master's degree, and during my PhD coursework, I took numerous classes regarding groundwater, the characterization of aquifers, the relationship between geology and aquifer characteristics like transmissivity and storativity. I have experience since at least 1990, possibly earlier, on the particular movement, the particular characteristics of groundwater movement in the karst aquifer, specifically associated with the Edwards karst and the Trinity aquifer karst. I was an expert on the for the Sierra Club on the endangered species and the movement of groundwater and into San Marcos and Comal Springs in the early 1990s. I literally have 40 years of experience. 40 years? Yeah, more than 40 years of experience working with groundwater quality, the movement of groundwater, the movement of and fate and transport of constituents in the groundwater, as well as their association and how geologic characteristics and depositional environments inform that transport.
And you were asked some questions as to whether this is over the Edwards aquifer recharge zone or contributing zone. But is this in fact over the Trinity aquifers recharge zone?
Yes, thank you because if I go back and think about it, I made the assumption, and I'm not sure that that question was asked with respect to the Edwards, but the state designates a recharge zone and a contributing zone for the Edwards aquifer. So when I hear those words, absent the specification of an aquifer, I think about that TCEQ designation with respect to the Edwards aquifer. So let me be really clear. This is within the jurisdictional boundaries of the contributing zone for the Edwards aquifer. What that means is that because it's in the contributing zone, it will recharge. It's just not directly recharging. There are intervening pathways. It is the water that is proposed for this discharge will, even though it's technically in the contributing zone, it will recharge the Trinity aquifer, and it will also contribute recharge to the Edwards aquifer.
And for
I
now,
think it's the use of that word zone, probably.
Mr. Allman, let me stop you there. I want to ask a clarifying question, Dr. Ross. You started your statement by saying this is within. By this, you mean the plant or the ranch?
All of the above. The plant, the ranch, and the proposed outfall are all upstream of what the boundary that is the recharge zone. If you map that recharge zone boundary, I think it falls just downstream on Elotes Creek from the southern boundary of the Gray Forest city limits. It's so close, it might even be within the ETJ. I'm not sure about that, but we're definitely upstream of that TCEQ delineation of the is basically the outcrop of the Edwards aquifer, Edwards limestone.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead, Mr. Allman.
And I want to talk about focus on the Trinity for just a minute. I think we covered before that these wells owned and operated by the City of Gray Forest are located in the Trinity Formation. And I think you just clarified that the discharge point is into the Trinity. And as I understand it, Helotes Creek then flows over the Trinity. Is all of that kind of an accurate characterization of our situation here?
I would say it, the discharge location and Helotes Creek cross the formations that recharge the Trinity Aquifer.
And you used the word karst. What's meant by the word karst with reference to an aquifer?
Sure. Aquifers are generally divided into a few different kinds of types of aquifers. I think what I wanted to say classic, but not in Central Texas. The classic idea of an aquifer is what we call a forest media aquifer, where the water is actually moving between the tiny little grains of sand. And it has a certain characteristic in terms of the travel time. You know, it's slow, there's filtration that happens. And it's also really easy to model relative to a karst aquifer. When we talk about karst aquifers in Central Texas, we're talking about aquifers that exist in dissolved limestone. The pathways can be cavernous. There can be absolutely no filtration, just the water moves through a crack in the rock into a cavern in the rock and then intercepts a spring or well. And so those are two of the general categories in terms of kinds of aquifers.
And is the Trinity a karst aquifer?
Yes.
Okay. And how does the...
since I'm under oath, right? The Trinity behaves both ways. It can behave as a karst aquifer, and it also can behave as a diffusive aquifer. And I think in this area, it actually has some of the characteristics of both. So yes, it does behave as a karst aquifer, but in some locations, it may also be behaving more like that classic forest media aquifer.
And so how does that tendency of the Trinity to at least partly behave as a karstic aquifer impact the ability, as you look at this case, for contaminants to move from the discharge point or from downstream in Helotes Creek to the wells owned and operated by the City of Gray Forest Utility?
So, and I think this goes back to the research that was done by the Southwest Research Institute on the character of losses through the bottom of Helotes Creek. It is cavernous, Glenrose limestone. Movement's going to be, movement through the bottom of the creek, there's going to be more water moving in. And I think they basically said, it's the Trinity in this area, or the Glenrose outcrop in this area, is behaving like the Edwards, even though the legal designation is contributing and not recharge zone.
Your Honor, that's all of my questions on redirect for this witness.
All right, Ms. Gilbert, do you have recross, before I ask you, do you have any questions before I let you get to the questions? I want to make sure anyone else, doesn't want to go first, but do you have anything?
I don't have any recross for this witness, but I do have a response to the request for standing.
Okay, let me first ask Mr. Allman, does that conclude all of your witnesses?
Yes, Your Honor, that concludes our witnesses.
All right, so here's what I'd like to do. I'd like to take argument from Mr. Allman and also from Ms. Gilbert on the request. And what we'll do is I want to get a sense after that of how many other parties or people are seeking affected person status so that we can get a sense of how to manage our time. It's about 11:30 now. So let's hear the argument, and let me just say that at some point, Judge Doggett and I will take a break to discuss before we come back and make decisions on all the parties who may be making requests. But let's just go ahead and hear argument for Gray Forest at this point. Mr. Ullman.
Yes, Your Honor. As you know, standing in TCEQ proceedings is governed by the same standard as constitutional standing in court, which requires an injury in fact fairly traceable to the activity at issue that can be redressed by the proceeding. In this case, there is a particularized injury in fact to the city of Gray Forest, actually several different ones. One of those is the potential impact upon the property owned by the city of Gray Forest as Scenic Loop Park, the 28 acres, and Madla Park, in that this discharge does have the potential to cause the growth of algae along Helotes Creek that would interfere with the uses of those parks, for example, for fishing or wading. So that is a property interest potentially impacted by this discharge. It also potentially has an impact upon the use of these groundwater wells by the city of Gray Forest, in that there is the potential there for the movement of contamination into the wells that would impact the use of those wells as a water source. And of course, we would note that at the standing stage, the issue is whether there's a potential for an impact. All facts, all evidence presented by the person seeking jurisdiction are presumed to be true, and any reasonable inferences to that effect are taken. So this is not the time to consider and make a decision upon the merits. It's time to decide just whether there's a potential for that particularized and concrete impact. And we think the city of Gray Forest has shown that it would have concrete and particularized impacts to both the property it owns in the form of these parks and to its use of these groundwater wells. For that reason, we feel that they've demonstrated themselves to be an affected person.
Thank you, Mr. Ullman. Ms. Gilbert?
Thank you, Your Honor. What none of the witnesses mentioned, nor did counsel mention, is that governmental entities' standing is evaluated under a different standard. And that's spelled out in 55.203 B and C7. And the short of it is that a governmental entity like the city of Gray Forest has to have authority under state law over the issue raised by the application. And as you heard the utility director, Mr. Remmert, say, they don't issue wastewater permits. We are not within the ETJ of the city of Gray Forest. I'm going to ask our engineer at this point to put our map up on the screen that we've shown earlier for demonstrative purposes to show that we are well outside the city of Gray Forest corporate boundaries, and we are also outside of their ETJ. That is why San Antonio Met Health Department is a party in this matter, because we are within the city of San Antonio's extraterritorial jurisdiction, not the city of Gray Forest. The TCEQ has already evaluated Gray Forest requests. And by the way, they also evaluated SAW's request and the city of Helotes's request. And they found specifically with respect to the city of Helotes that they did not have sufficient statutory authority. With respect to Gray Forest, they found, and these were Chairman Neerman's words, that they weren't quite close enough. As the purple area shows you, they are more than 2.5 miles downstream from the discharge point. They're 2.62 miles to the corporate boundaries. We also heard the city's witnesses concede that the public water supply, the two wells, are also within the corporate limits. So those also are more than 2.5 miles away. What we also did not hear from any of these witnesses, but only at the end when counsel wrapped up, was that they had a particularized injury. That's simply not the case. Their interest, and we got into kind of a mini trial and sort of a preview of things to come on interesting things like phosphorus and algae and whether nitrate will impact the groundwater supply. But we didn't hear anything about that would qualify a justiciable interest. These interests articulated this morning were all common to the general public. And there were other members, other landowners with groundwater wells who are members of GIA who qualified to have standing because their interest was not common to the general public. And that's what we have here with the city of Gray Forest. So they have to be evaluated under the governmental entity standing requirement. They have no statutory interest in discharge applications. And additionally, they're just too far away, just as Chairman Yearman said. They've considered this request and they found that Gray Forest is not an affected person.
Mr. Allman, do you want to make a response?
Yes, I would like to make a response. First, the authority of a governing entity in relationship to an application is one factor that can be considered, but it is not a limit upon the factors to be considered. The standard applicable to a governing entity is the same as that to any other, and that's the constitutional standing requirement, that they show particularized injury fairly traceable to the activity that could be redressed by the proceeding. They need not, there's no requirement that they have governmental authority over the issues related. That being the case, here the city does have authority within its boundaries to abate nuisances and to take actions to protect the land uses within its city boundaries. And those are authority that is related to the impacts of this application. Furthermore, the city has shown particularized impacts to the interests of the city, and that the property owned by the city here, the 28 acres along Helotes Creek and Madla Park also there, are areas that the city specifically has a duty to maintain and that it owns. That's a particularized property interest that it has. In addition, these wells, not the general public doesn't own these particular water wells and have the responsibility to provide that water to particular persons. There's a particularized impact in that ownership of the wells and the water there, their use of it to provide water, that is different than the interest held by the general public. And as to distance, there is no rule or statute that limits the distance at which a person may be considered affected. The evidence of an expert nature that's now before you, opining and demonstrating the potential here for an impact to occur, was not before the commission when it made a decision. And we think that expert analysis in combination with the information as to the ownership of property and the location of wells does demonstrate that there is that potential, there is that particularized interest at issue here and particularized impact to the city of Gray Forest.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Allman. We'll take all of that under consideration. And Ms. Gilbert, if you could stop the screen share. Thank you. Let me pause here for a moment. Who else is going to be seeking party status in this case? If you could identify yourself. Okay. I'm not seeing anyone. I'm flipping through a few screens here with a number of people in the Zoom, but I'm not seeing anyone else raising their hand or speaking up. If you're on the phone, you would need to press *6 to unmute yourself. Am I missing anyone? No. All right. What I'd like to do is let's go off the record for a moment.
Recording stopped.
Okay, so what I'd like to do is see if we can do parallel tracks here. Mr. Allman, since you would be representing Gray Forest, if they were admitted as a party, you're already representing someone who's in this proceeding. So what I'd like to do is have a breakout room where you and Ms. Gilbert and Mr. Freeland, Mr. Mercer, Mr. Eckert, Mr. Salazar Martinez, hopefully I'm not missing anyone, but anyone who needs to be there can discuss scheduling issues if you haven't had a chance to put a draft proposed schedule of hearing dates together, let you do that while Judge Doggett and I also talk. So that way, regardless of what decision we make, you'll be there, Mr. Allman, to talk about scheduling. How does that sound?
That sounds, yeah, we will attempt to work through it. I know there's a number of different schedules to try and consider here, so we will certainly see what progress we can make.
And Ms. Gilbert, does that work? Okay.
That's fine, Your Honor. We've circulated a proposed schedule.
Okay. So what I'd like to do then is to create a breakout room, and what I'll do is that I will let participants choose if you want to be put in that breakout room, or if you want to join that room. The purpose of that room is for people who are going to be involved. So primarily the parties who are already recognized as affected people, meaning the executive director, the Office of Public Interest Counsel, the San Antonio Metropolitan Health District, the GIA, and the applicant, and so on, to discuss the schedule in this case. But if you are otherwise interested, you can also join that breakout room, just so you know what that's about. And the Zoom hearing in this main room will stop. Since we don't actually have a YouTube feed going, that won't be affected. But this breakout room, or the breakout room, will continue, but the Zoom here won't have anything going on. You're welcome to stay in it while we take a break, and then you can come back. What I'm thinking of doing is taking about 20 minutes, or yeah, maybe 20 minutes until noon, and then hopefully we can come back, we can talk, and we'll be able to break fairly quickly after that, so we don't have to take a lunch break and come back. I'd like to let everyone go sooner rather than later. Other comment while we're still off the record: if you're just watching this proceeding, you are welcome to turn your video off so that you're just listening. That way you don't see yourself on screen. And no one else sees you, so it's up to you. You're free to do that. Okay, let me go back on the record.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we're back on the record. To summarize what we discussed, or what I discussed off the record, we're going to create a breakout room where the parties who are admitted thus far can discuss a schedule. Also, other parties who want to join that breakout room will be allowed to. But in the meantime, Judge Doggett and I will separately discuss the application made by Gray Forest, and we'll come back at about noon to see where we are. And hopefully, Ms. Gilbert indicated that a draft schedule had been circulated already, so we can hopefully have something that we can adopt to look at that point. Does anyone have any questions before we proceed with the breakout room? Okay. And I have opened a room, so now people should start seeing the option to join room number 1. You can join that room and be there to discuss scheduling.
And I'll note, while I've got the attention, that I'd like our legal assistant Claire to join in that room, and Lauren Ross, since she will be one of the witnesses.
Okay.
To work around a lot of different schedules we got here.
I'm sorry, I have a dumb question. In order to go to the breakout room, we just choose okay, leave meeting. Okay.
Yeah, that'll put you into that room. And if you have a problem, I'll wait here for a minute or so, and you can come back and let me know. Okay, so we're going to go off the record now.
Recording stopped.
And like I said, Judge Doggett and I will be turning off our audio and video. We'll be meeting separately and coming back at about noon. Everyone else is welcome to remain here. The Zoom will remain open, but nothing will be recorded. Thank you.
Okay, is Helen here just yet?
I don't see her, Eric. You want to go ahead and we can make an agreement and then maybe we can be done before Helen gets on here.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I'll give her a minute.
Oh, wait, she's calling me. Hold on a second. All right, Helen cut herself off. She's trying to get back on. I have her on speakerphone here. Shouldn't even see her. No, can't get her in. Say something, Helen.
Hi.
I can hear.
I can hear her. I'd leave it to her how she wants to proceed. If she wants to hop back on through the Zoom, that's okay. I can't hear
Well,
what.
they have to let me in is the thing, I think. So I've asked several times now. I'm gonna talk to you guys the best I can and also notify Michael Martinez. But I've asked our engineer to put up the procedural schedule and y'all can just tell me what your problems are, I guess.
So I think part of the problem, the date proposed for the hearing on the merits there, February 10th through the 13th. And I think Lauren Ross is on here. Lauren, do you have a conflict with that period?
I hold on, let me just look and see. Yes, I will be out of Austin the 10th through the 12th of February.
So the 10th through the 13th would not work as a hearing date for the protestants. And she's going to be a witness for GIA even if Gray Forest is not admitted as a party.
Okay, what does the next week look like?
Wide open for me.
So that week of February 17th through the 21st. I think we could
ED has a witness that has some unavailability on the 20th and 21st of that week, but the 17th through the 19th is clear so far. But we are also still waiting on a few witnesses to get back with us on their availability.
Yeah, that week, I think the 17th to the 19th would work fine for me as long as that the closing brief deadline was pushed back a week as well, because we need 2 weeks with the transcripts for closing.
Hold on. Can I ask a question? Part of that is just my fault for getting dumped off the call, but did you say that Dr. Ross's conflict was with the entire week of the 10th?
I am returning back into Austin on Wednesday, the 12th.
So we could proceed on the 13th and 14th, right? Y'all have a problem with that?
I think we would be okay with beginning on the 13th and 14th. I think it's going to be more than a 2-day hearing, I would anticipate.
Yeah,
So
it might be. And we're happy to take people out of order if that's more convenient for Dr. Ross and others. But yeah, we're gonna get well into the briefing period if we push it any further. We could break it up over the weekend and do the 13th, 14th, 17th, and 18th.
Can we wait and start on the 14th? I don't want Dr. Ross to go straight from getting back in town to going into hearing the next day. That would be difficult. Starting on the 14th.
I would say preliminarily yes, but I need to confirm that with my experts. I have a few.
Do we anticipate 3 days, or do we think it's better to preserve 4 and then try and finish it in 3 if possible?
I think personally we ought to schedule it for 4, try to get it done in 2 or 3, just so we reserve those days. We just had a hearing with some of the guys on the call right now, and I think we had 13 to 15 total witnesses.
Yeah.
And we've done in
3 days.
Mm-hmm.
So the 14th, 17th, 18th to 19th?
Again, I need to just confirm that, but I think that's generally okay. Are all the dates prior to that all right with everybody? Or are we just starting with the hearing on the merits?
I think my intent would just start with a hearing on the merits and then to look and see if we can fit in the other dates, as the hearing seemed a more important one to accommodate witness schedules. And it would seem if the hearing isn't starting until the 14th that we could move the final pre-hearing conference to earlier that week, say the 11th or the 12th.
Yeah, I agree.
And then the deadlines to objections. Well, let's say the 12th for the pre-hearing conference, if that's okay with you. And that way we can move the deadlines for responses to objections up a bit to the 7th.
From the 5th to the 7th?
Yes.
Fine.
And then move the deadline for objections and motions to the 31st from the 29th.
That's fine.
And like, I just know that we have some concern with tightness in the early part of the schedule, so I want to see if we can shift things as we can. So the deadline for the applicant and executive director to the 22nd to the 24th, we could.
Wait, say that again. You want to change the pre-file testimony filing?
Yeah, for the applicant from January 22nd to January 24th.
You're giving us more time?
Well, I think that we're going to look at.
You want more time, right?
Well, yeah, I'm going to want more time when we get up. We've got a brief at the Fifth Circuit due on December 23rd, so that's not going to work for the Protestants pre-file.
What are you suggesting?
December 31st.
You're asking for 2 additional weeks?
Well,
we've got need 2 days?
Well, I'm only asking for 1 additional week, moving from the 23rd to the 31st, just moving it. Again, I've got a Fifth Circuit brief due on the 23rd that we can't move, with a brief to the Tyler Court of Appeals on, I think, the 19th currently due. And so the 23rd is not going to feasibly work for us for the pre-file. And then you get Christmas. And so either December 31st is where we would suggest moving the Protestants pre-file. And that still leaves from there to January 24th, approximately 4 weeks for the applicant to put together your testimony. If we can move that deadline for Protestants to December 31st. And I think with that, if we made that change, we'd be okay with moving the deadline for the applicant ED to designate expert witnesses from the 12th to the 19th.
What's your position, Joe?
I mean, that works for me, Helen. I mean, if that gives you enough time for testimony, that would be great. If you need to push your deadline back a little, I don't know. I mean, we could cut into our time to look at what objections we might have to testimony. I think we could probably give up some time there.
Yeah, I think that's true.
Yeah, I agree. I'm going to need more time, so we're going to have to push and compress the objections and replies.
So what date would you propose rather than the 24th?
January 30 gives us a month, which is the typical and now shorter turnaround time than y'all have.
Okay, and if we had those due the 30th, what date would you propose for objections?
Probably following week, the 6th, and then replies to objections on the 10th, and then pre-hearing conference on the 12th.
That would work for us.
Yeah, that's fine with me, Helen.
And then we looked, so if
I'm
we go
going
back,
to let's just make it nice and neat. I'm going to take one extra day to the January 31st. Why not? Friday. And then we'll do, well, we do objections on the 6th or 7th and replies the 10th or 11th. I don't really care.
how about we go ahead and do the 7th for objections and replies the 11th?
Okay.
Well, yeah, replies the 11th.
Okay. And that's what works for me, but I haven't heard from the ED, so.
Those dates should work for us for all the due dates for 194 objections, PFT. That's fine with us.
Now, as we look at, we had moved up through the deadline for the applicant and the ED to designate expert witnesses, move that from the 12th to the 19th. We would propose that the protestant's designation be moved from the 5th through the 12th.
Yeah, I don't understand that move.
Well, you're getting another week to delay your responsive designation of experts. It seems fair to delay protestants by a week. And I know we're sitting here on November 21st, headed into Thanksgiving week, and then hitting December. The 5th is just very soon to try and provide those disclosures.
I think 2 weeks is really standard. And this has already been pending for like 2 years. I don't know why we have to touch that part of the schedule at all.
Well, I think that it's not standard to have Thanksgiving week fall just only a few days after the preliminary hearing. And so I think the 12th, especially given that we've moved your deadline for designation, that's still giving you the same amount of time to respond as you had proposed.
I don't need to move my designations.
Well, I know that's what we had just agreed to. I'm just saying.
I'm sorry, I thought we were pushing your pre-filed testimony and then everything thereafter. So it looks like every single thing in the schedule is being changed. I don't agree to that. Why do typical disclosures is in 2 weeks and a week thereafter for responses by applicant and the ED.
Well, again, typically we don't have Thanksgiving week falling the week after, only a few days after the preliminary hearing. I had heard Agreement to move the pre-hearing conference to the 12th, to move the deadlines for response to objections to the 11th, the objections to February 7th was all of that was agreed, and then deadline for applicant to file pre-file the 31st, and the protest of January, protestants file pre-filed December 31st, applicant and the ED to designate on the 19th, and so it then only makes sense to move. You get the same amount of time.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't hear the 19th and I don't agree to that.
Well, I think that, but did you agree to everything before the 19th that was listed?
Let me look at the latter part. We agreed to move your pre-filed testimony to the New Year's Eve and ours by a month to the 31st, and everything thereafter except the post-briefing schedule. But we did not change the disclosures unless you said that and I didn't hear it, but I didn't agree to that.
Okay.
I don't know why. I mean, you're allowed to supplement, and I think that's very standard to have 2 weeks.
Well, if there's an understanding that we're allowed to supplement with I just, we think that the 5th is simply too soon given the Thanksgiving holiday coming up next week.
I mean, these cases are always too soon. Yeah, it's just longer on the front end. What does the EG think about disclosures? I'm assuming you want more time. Or does it matter?
We're always happy to have more time. So we're fine with the 12th or the 19th.
Okay.
However it shakes out.
All right, then that's fine. I don't know why anyway. Yeah, that's fine. I'll agree to it. We're changing everything at this point except the post-briefing schedule, right?
Yes. And, yes, we're changing everything from what was the applicant's proposal. So we want to walk through that again to make sure that we're on the same page. I've got the protestants and OPIC's designation on December 12th, and then the applicant and ED's designation on December 19th. The protestants and OPIC's pre-filed on December 31st. The applicant ED's pre-file on January 31st. Any objections and motions to strike on, I guess I've got several things written down. What was it we had discussed for that?
For objections?
Objections, yeah. Is that the 7th is what you've got
I
marked
think you
down?
said February 7th.
Okay. And then the responses being February the 11th, the final pre-hearing conference being February 12th, and then the hearing on the merits starting on the 14th and running through
The 19th,
the
I think
19th.
you said. Yeah, and I just think we're gonna have to add another week for the closing briefs because of getting transcripts, particularly if we have 4 days of hearing, it's gonna take them a while to generate. So I would propose that the closing brief get moved to the 10th.
Can we move that to the 11th?
Sure.
Just to avoid a Monday deadline?
Okay.
And then the replies from March 21st through the 28th.
Yeah, we don't have a choice on the 21st, so we just get 10 days for the reply.
Okay.
Does somebody want to go over that one more time?
Well, I can walk through what I've got. So the protestants and OPIC designate expert witnesses and provide the disclosures December 12th. The applicant and the ED designate witnesses and provide disclosures December 19th. The protestants and OPIC pre-file direct testimony December 31st. The applicant and the ED file pre-file testimony January 31st. All parties file objections. I think you said February 6th.
7th.
February 7th. And then the parties file responses to objections February the 11th. Final pre-hearing conference February 12th. And the hearing on the merits the 14th through the 19th. The deadline for closing briefs being March 11th. And the deadline for replies to closing briefs being March the 21st. Leaving the deadline for proposal for decision May 20th.
So, and we would
Hey
also
everyone, sorry to interrupt. This is Judge Doggett. Just wanted to check. Do y'all need some more time?
I think we're getting close.
Okay, another 5 minutes, 10 minutes. What do you need?
we need like 2 minutes, I think.
2 minutes. Okay, I'll check back at 12:10. Give you a little grace period, but thank y'all, and y'all can proceed.
Now, I do want to look at some of the stipulations up that you had
Yeah,
noted
go
at
ahead.
the bottom. I think we can agree draft expert reports and witness notes and correspondence with witnesses are not discoverable. We're okay with depositions being taken after pre-file, but now that we've moved some of the schedule,
Yeah.
I think we could have that January 29th fits in.
It needs to be moved to February 7th.
Okay. And
I
we
think.
do agree to electronic service, and we can agree to 28-day deadlines on all discovery responses.
Okay, I think we're good if the ED and Joe agree.
We agree.
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, that's all looks good.
Okay. And so have you been tracking that on the Word document that's being shared?
No, I'm just now looking at that. So,
Yes, whoever has control of the document has made all the changes.
I think the changes are reflected in the gray.
Yeah, the gray highlights.
And let's look at the stipulations at the very bottom, make sure that change from January 29th, February 7th is also reflected.
yeah, that January 29th needs to be changed to February 7th, Troy, please. Yeah. And would you just do me a favor and take out the question marks and the weekend reference? And I mean, I guess that's fine.
Just so that I'm clear on my calendar, the hearing would be Friday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, the 14th through the 19th of February, but not Saturday and Sunday, the 15th and 16th. Is that right?
That's my understanding.
Yeah, I think he was just trying to abbreviate it. Why don't you just put a comma in there and put 17 through 19? Thanks.
Appreciate y'all's patience. I'm a much better engineer than stenographer.
Yeah, stick with your day job. And will you take the blue highlighting off?
I'll take all the highlighting out. Well, do you want me to republish this as a update all the verbiage and nonsense in there?
No. We're just gonna keep it on the screen. You can take that map down too.
Okay.
When the ALJs get back on, they may want us to submit something. I don't know. We'll probably talk through it.
Okay. I'll reshare my screen. I think I just dropped this on top of the screen I was sharing. I kind of messed that up too.
Okay, it looks like everyone's done talking, so I'll go ahead and close that breakout room. All right, Ms. Gilbert, since you're representing the applicant, I'll put you on the spot. Have you all had a chance to discuss and come up with a schedule?
We have, Your Honor, and we can share the screen to show you or talk you through the dates that we have.
Why don't we take a look at it on the screen, and I'll put us back on the record so we can discuss it, and then we can talk about next steps.
Recording in progress.
All right, we're back on the record. The parties took a break so that they could discuss a schedule. And right now we're going to take a look at that and talk about any issues that we need to address. Go ahead, Ms. Gilbert.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. Today is obviously the top row, and all the dates that are shaded are the dates that we've agreed upon. So we kind of need to disregard everything else. Actually, everything except for the preliminary hearing date and the close of the record have changed. So protestants and OPIC's disclosures would be due December 12th. Ours would be due, ours and the EDs would be due a week after December 19th. Protestants, OPIC's pre-file testimony would be due December 31st, and that would include the order of witnesses, exhibits. Our pre-file testimony, again, in the EDs, would be due a month later on January 31st. The time frame for objections to pre-filed is on February 7th, slightly compressed, and responses to those objections would be due February 11th. A pre-hearing conference is set for February 12th. We didn't talk about flexibility in changing that or even pushing it to the day of the first day of hearing. But for now, the 12th, and then hearing on the merits would start on Friday, the 14th, to accommodate witnesses, and some may still need to be taken out of order and then resume the next week, February 17th through 19th. Closing briefs, March 11th. Replies to closing briefs due March 21st, which is the close of the record, giving you 60 days for PFD due May 20th.
Okay, so it looks like you're asking for 4 days total for the hearing. It would be the 14th and then the 17th, 18th, and 19th of February.
Yes, Your Honor. It may be less than that, so we over included to be safe.
Yeah, we're hopeful that it'll be less. We figure better to reserve an extra day than to have to continue the hearing to another day.
All right. And so is it scheduling that would need you to start on the 14th?
I'm sending there's ED witnesses unavailable as we move into the next week. And so in order to get in an extra day prior to that ED witness unavailability, we had added February 14th onto the schedule.
I don't see that being a problem. Is there anyone who disagrees with this schedule?
Judge Shinoy, I just want to point out, President's Day is February 17th. I believe so is closed. So that may be a problem from our end.
Well, we can still convene the hearing on that day, assuming that it's on Zoom.
Okay.
As far as the office being closed, there won't be any support for anything that people need to do in terms of filing or other, things like that. So that would be the only reason to not convene that day. We could convene on the 14th and then the 18th through 20th to avoid that day altogether. But we can convene the hearing on Zoom. Now, let me just ask, is there anyone who's moving to have this hearing in person?
No. And Your Honor, if I could ask for a clarification on when the ED witnesses are unavailable there. I'd rather be able to start the Monday and not start that Friday on Valentine's Day. That'd be preferable to avoid if we can.
We have 2 witnesses that are unavailable from the 20th to the 21st. So if we could take them earlier, then we could be able to fit into that 14th to the 20th.
Well, what I was going to suggest, Your Honor, was we consider putting the hearing the 17th through the 20th, and we can take the ED's witnesses out of order if needed to get them in before the 20th.
We don't have a problem with that, again, assuming that we would go forward on President's Day via Zoom.
That would be, we have no objection to that.
Okay, and so what about though starting on the 18th and going through the 21st and still taking the ED's witnesses out of order? That gives you 4 days in a row.
I think if we could try and work through the protestants on the 18th so the ED was not going before the protestants witnesses, we could work with that.
We would be okay with the ED would be fine with that as well.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear that. The ED would be fine with the protestants going after the ED?
No.
I had thought he was saying they would go on the 18th and then the ED's witnesses that are unavailable on the 20th and 21st would go on the 19th.
Yeah, I just don't want the ED be testifying before the protestants. We would like to preserve that. Preserve the regular order as nearly as possible is what we're trying to do. And I did want to note there's some stipulations at the bottom, one of which I think we need to further clarify. I know the parties were in agreement that draft expert reports, witnesses, notes, and correspondence are not discoverable. It's the agreement that all depositions can be taken after pre-file testimony deadlines and up until February 7th. We agreed to that, but I don't think it is consistent with some of the language above about the deadline for all discovery to be completed on parties. Our understanding would be that that stipulation at the bottom would control and not language in what's before you about all discovery being completed.
Okay, so let's do this. I'd like that to be agreed upon by the parties if possible. Yeah. So what I'd like is for you to discuss this and come back with something that's agreed. You can file it by tomorrow if you need additional time.
I think that was agreed. I was just trying to reflect the agreement of the parties. And
actually, no, the rule states that discovery is over on that party on their deadline to pre-file, and that bullet was more of an exception dealing with depositions only.
And with that understanding, we're okay with it. It just, maybe we submit to you, Your Honor, something that's got language that the parties are comfortable accurately reflects the agreement.
I think that would be the most prudent course. So let's say by noon tomorrow, is that enough time? I'd like an agreed schedule with all the dates, cleanly reflected to be submitted. And we'll plan on the hearing being February 18th, which is a Tuesday, through the 21st, with the understanding that protestants' witnesses will be on the 18th, and ED will present its witnesses who are otherwise, otherwise unavailable on the 19th.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Is that agreeable to everyone? Anyone have issues with that? All right. Hearing nothing, I think we have concluded all of our tasks for today. Let me just be sure, look at my notes and make sure we're not missing anything. And let me ask Judge Doggett, is there anything else that we need to discuss? Okay. And the exhibits that were admitted today, in particular the administrative record, the other exhibits as well, but we'll talk about how those will be handled for purposes of the hearing on the merits at a later point. I'm assuming that all of the evidence that was presented at this point will need to be resubmitted, witnesses recalled, and so on. But the administrative record needs to be e-filed by 5 p.m. tomorrow. And I know it's already been e-filed for us, but this is something that I'm required to do by our records department, that it needs to be officially e-filed as an admitted exhibit. So that, and then all of the other exhibits that we admitted for Gray Forest would need to be e-filed. And so for Gray Forest, I had exhibits 1, let me go back, 1, 2, and 3. Let's see. 1, 2, and 3 were admitted. 4 and 5 was a demonstrative. And then also number 6, Mr. Ullman, if you wanted to admit it as an offer of proof. And let me just go ahead and I didn't say this for the record. We are admitting, we recognize that based on the totality of the evidence, Gray Forest has established that it is an affected person. So we are going to admit Gray Forest as a party. And they are represented by the same counsel, Mr. Ullman. So you've already represented their interests in terms of the schedule. Is that correct?
Yes, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. So no changes need to be made to that. We will ask that at our end that Gray Forest be added to the service list, but we'll also follow up and see what else needs to be done on that.
Your Honor.
Yes.
Sorry, we would move to align all the protesting parties as one protestant party.
Meaning the San Antonio Metropolitan Health as well?
Correct.
Well, I'll hear from Mr. Ullman and Mr. Freeland on that.
Your Honor, we don't object to GIA and the City of Gray Forest being aligned. We would object to those entities being aligned with the San Antonio Metropolitan Health. We think that the interests are adequately distinct and those parties are represented by independent counsel. That alignment of San Antonio with GIA and Gray Forest does not make sense in this instance. I'll let Mr. Freeland speak to their position.
Mr. Freeland?
Yes, Your Honor. If GIA and Gray Forest are object to it, we don't need to be aligned. We would object to alignment as well.
All right. So as it stands right now, GIA and the City of Great Forest, or GIA and Ms. Toperwine are already aligned or represented by Mr. Ullman. Ms. Toperwine is participating through GIA. Mr. Ullman, is that right?
Yeah, and we don't object to City of Gray Forest being aligned with both of those. It's the San Antonio Metropolitan Health that's the concern.
Right. And given that there is an objection and that, at least from my perusal of what we have in front of us so far, there do appear to be some distinct interests. I'm going to let San Antonio Metro Health be a separate party, not align them. But GIA, City of Great Forest, and Elizabeth Toperwine are aligned. Was there something else on that, Ms. Gilbert? No. Okay. Then, of course, is mediation something that the parties want to discuss through SOA? If you would like to be referred for mediation evaluation, I can certainly do that. We're still on that 180-day schedule, so it's obviously something that you'll have to think about in terms of what's possible. But if you believe that that's something that could be beneficial to you, you can certainly file a motion. We'll refer the case for evaluation. All right, we talked about exhibits. We will get the schedule from you by noon tomorrow, and then we'll issue an order officially adopting it and clarifying anything that we think needs to change. Like I said, the hearing is going to be February 18th through 21st, 2025. And the other dates on the schedule looked fine from our perspective. So if there's any other changes that the parties make subsequent to what was shown today on the screen, make sure that everyone's in agreement and submit it by noon tomorrow. And all right, Judge Doggett, am I forgetting anything else? No. Okay. All right, I think I've covered everything, and we're at a good point for everyone to break for the day. So thank you all. We are adjourned, and we will see you in February. Thanks.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Thanks, Your Honor.
Thank you.
Recording stopped.